Dan Maccarone.
Thank you for having me.
Adventures in the life of a fractional CPO.
It's been an adventure so far.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Let's see if I can. There we go. All right. This is me. I'm Dan. Thank you guys so much for having me here at UX Copenhagen. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Hella, for doing such a great job organizing this. I really appreciate it. I want to talk to you a little bit about myself in context to why I'm talking about being a fractional CPO. So I've been in the world of user experience since the late 90s. And I was an information architect when that was the en vogue term, and I became a UX designer and a UX lead later on. I think later on I became a product lead, which all eventually led me to starting a company called Charming Robot. And Charming Robot is a product design company, and we work with really large-scale organizations, kind of helping them, often dragging them kicking and screaming into the world of digital. Even in the late, early 2020s, we still have people who still don't understand how digital is a real big part of their business. And the other side of what we do is we work with startups, kind of help them launch, help them kind of grow them for their first couple years, really help them understand, founders understand how to take their vision and the problem they're solving and make it into something. And that's all fine and good. And it's been great being a part of helping startups. It's been great being a part of an agency for so long. I mean, my whole career has been in agencies. But here's the problem. When you spend 20-something years in the world of agencies, you work on 15 to 20 projects at one time across multiple industries, and that's great. You launch 100 products, some of which are successful, some of which fail miserably. I'm a generalist, so I tend to have skill sets that go across a lot of these things. But what I found over the past 4 or 5 years was that I kind of got sick of it. I got sick of working on 20 projects. I got sick of basically actually seeing the same thing happen over and over again. I saw founders make the same mistakes. I saw big companies refuse to acknowledge how tech and UX and design and product thinking could really influence their organizations. And it kind of was a moment of crisis for me, because I love creating products and I love launching things. And right around the time this started happening a few years ago, another thing started happening in my company, which is people were bringing us in, large companies, startups, and they were like, we need UX help, we need design help. And we'd go in and talk to these organizations, and they didn't need UX help. Or maybe they did, but they were so far premature to needing UX and design help, they had no process. They had no organization. We'd go into companies, and they'd be like, we need UX help, and I'd look around at their teams, and they'd have designers over here, and they'd have writers over here, and UX people and programmers, and none of them talked to each other. There was no project management. There was no product management. There was no vision. There was just designers over here, developers over here, and them kind of talking over the wall to each other and not really collaborating or understanding why they were doing what they were doing. And my company became less about creating products and more about creating organizations. Became less about solving problems for users and it became more about solving problems for companies. Well, that's not why I got into this. I got into this because I want to make things that actually help people, things that actually change the world in a lot of ways. And I started thinking to myself, working on 20 products, working with 10 companies, and trying to have really initiate change wasn't going to work anymore. And I saw other friends of mine in the world of tech coming into companies as fractional CEOs or fractional CTOs, fractional CMOs. And I thought, well, why can't we do that in product? Why can't we do that as user experience people and change the UX within an organization as well as in the product itself? And so I thought, what if we totally changed our company and became fractional CPOs that build teams internally instead of from an agency, and actually, influence change? Great idea, bad idea, I don't know. Still working on it. But it's been interesting to see where you can really have effect and where it totally breaks down. And believe me, it can totally break down. So let's start with the very simple question of what even is a fractional CPO? I don't even like the term fractional. I think it's a terrible term. I think it kind of makes it seem like you're not really committed. It makes it seem like, you're kind of halfway there. But for right now, I have no better term. So if you guys have ideas, please share them with me. I'd love to be able to find a better way of describing this. And when I say CPO, I mean Chief Product Officer, for those of you who don't know. So I thought, maybe instead of myself trying to define it, I'd let some people who are probably much smarter than me do it. So I started with Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And Reid, his whole point of fractional C-level people, people who can kind of think at the top, is about strategy. It's like letting people come in who have experience, who can help lead the vision, help the CEO or CTO or whatever, collaborate with those other C-level people with that vision, and then trickle it down. And Ben Horowitz, obviously, well-known investor, pioneer in the internet, his whole thing is about, if you're a startup especially, why would you want to pay someone hundreds of thousands of US dollars at least when you've only raised a small amount of money? When you want someone who can be effective, but who is not going to drain your bank account. And I thought to myself, that makes sense to me. And then Brad Feld, who's also a brilliant investor and wrote the book Venture Deals, which if you ever need to know anything about venture capital, he is the person to go to. His whole thing is that not all organizations are right for fractional people, but for startups, for people who can really take advantage of those who've seen it all before, that's where it really comes in. And I took those 3 learnings and I thought to myself, yeah, all right. I think for some people I know, not just myself, for other people I know who've been working in this field for almost 30 years, we bring a lot to the table. And people should be able to take advantage of that, even if it's not 40 or 60 or 80 hours a week. So what actually makes a person good at this? And I don't think this is the right role for everybody who's worked in UX. I don't think it's the right role for a CTO, for everyone who's worked in technology. I think it takes a certain amount of ability to dispense your knowledge, right? So shared learning is something where if you can work on 3 or 4 companies at once, you can bring your knowledge from company A to company B and company C to company A, because you're working on several different things and seeing the parallels that are happening between them. The expertise is just in terms of time. It could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, it could be whatever. Come to the table having seen it all. Like as a generalist, I think you get to see a lot of things in research, you see things in process, you see things in design that you can bring to the table that no one else can. Accountability. This is a huge one. I keep coming into companies where there's no accountability of anyone on the team. Like I mentioned before, where the designers were talking to people over here and the developers were talking to people over here, and no one was actually getting anything done. Someone who can actually bring accountability to the team. I think that an unbiased point of view is another big part of it. As an agency, I always find that we have struggled with this line where, on one hand, we want to be honest with the people we're working with. We want to tell them, listen, what you're thinking is a terrible idea and will make the internet a worse place. On the other hand, we want to get paid. So trying to find that balance where you're honest and you're transparent and you're unbiased is really hard, because as an agency, all I need is to get paid to pay my team. But as a fractional CPO, I can sit there and be like, look, I have 2 other gigs over here. My thought is about doing everything right for you. It's not about trying to pay my team. It's really about being fair to you as a founder or as a CEO. Now, I said earlier that this is something that I was thinking about, and I thought to myself, I'm pretty smart, fractional CPO. I'm going to revolutionize the world. I was not right. This is actually something that people have been thinking about for almost 30 years now. The New York Times wrote this story in 1996, and it wasn't even quite accepted then. You can see there's some doubts that there's certain issues that could come up with someone who's working fractionally. And I think that's important to acknowledge. There are some great benefits of bringing someone in part-time, but there are some challenges. I have a really good friend of mine who's an investor, and I was talking to him about this the other day, about being a fractional, and I was like, it's weird, you have so many great startups you work with. Why don't you ever recommend me or a couple of people we know as fractional CTOs or CMOs or CPOs? And he was like, well, what if you can't be there? What if something happens? What if a bank goes under for some reason and you can't be there as part of the C-level team? I think that's a very fair point, the idea of limited time and availability. I think there's a concern about communication, about being able to reach someone both available standpoint, but also availability and communication from the team standpoint. Can you communicate down to people or across people if you're only there part-time? I think those are right, and I think that it kind of goes back to the idea that a fractional CPO isn't right for everybody. But I think that, in all honesty, if you can overcome these things and you have the right person who really is willing to focus, I think the rest of this stuff becomes kind of bullshit. So let's talk about what actually makes this kind of opportunity successful. I look at the North Star here, right? When I work with a CEO or I work with a founder, the first thing I want to know is what is it that actually is critical to their success? Because if we don't have that agreement together, we're never going to do anything right. And I'll tell you a little bit about kind of where I've seen that mistake happen, where I've seen it fall apart in my own experience. But understanding what's right, what's going to make something successful is the place where we start with any product anyways, right? It's like, why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? What does this look like when we launch it? A founder or CEO should have that vision. Our job is to help translate that.